broadcasting from the neutral zone, where every perspective gets diplomatic immunity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Who was Hedy Lamarr? Was she the most beautiful woman in the world, or was she the secret godmother you've never heard about of all the technology that you use today? Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and more. That is what we'll find out here on Conspiracy Corner with Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic. He's also got a podcast. It's called The Uncover Up. Check it out. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Hey, always happy to be on.
Hedy Lamarr was like a heartthrob. No, that's how you describe men. How do you... Bombshell, that's the word I'm looking for.
Bombshell.
She was the it girl in the 1930s. Just a few short months ago, she was in some high-profile movies. She wasn't perceived as this great genius. She was just this great beauty, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Normally we talk about conspiracy stories. And today we're sort of conspiracy adjacent. We're going to be talking about the nature of stories themselves. And, of course, we're storytelling creatures. It's a big part of the way that we understand the world. I mean, conspiracy theories are just attempts to take this confusing mess that we're surrounded by and kind of distill it into a nice, simple explanation that helps us to contain everything in a single narrative. But the issue is that reality kind of enjoys being a mess. And it tends to resist our simple narratives. It's almost always more complicated than our stories allow. And so this story about this woman, Hedy Lamarr, well, it's not exactly a conspiracy. It does teach us something about the natures of stories themselves. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell the story of Hedy Lamarr, but I'd like to tell it 3 times.
Ooh, that sounds fun. What's that movie, Trainspotting?
Rashomon?
No, the one where they're like drug addicts and they tell the story from 3 different perspectives.
Trainspotting.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so we're going to train spot this, we're going to Rashomon this, we're going to do, one of those things.
Okay, so if I had never heard of Hedy Lamarr, which I hadn't before I started researching her, what would I have known her for 100 years ago, 80 years ago? Okay,
so story 1. This is the story of the most beautiful woman in the world.
Ooh.
Hedy Lamarr. So she's born Hedwig Keisler in Austria in 1914, and she starts off pretty early because she wins a beauty contest in Vienna when she's only 12 years old. And so obviously something like that is very formative to a person, and they sort of see their value and the value in beauty. So she starts taking acting classes as a way of capitalizing on that beauty, and when she's 16, shows up in her first film as an extra. But her beauty was too compelling to be confined to such a small role. So in her next film, she's given a small speaking part, and she keeps getting noticed because, again, she is just so overwhelming in her appearance. So she gets noticed by a producer, puts her in a play, brings her to Berlin. And while she's acting in plays, again, gets noticed. Her beauty is like this sort of siren call to men. And she's noticed by an extremely wealthy older man named Friedrich Mandel, who pursues her. He must possess her. He must possess this object of beauty, and marries her. And so now she is the 18-year-old wife of an older, extremely wealthy man. And while she's in Berlin, gets noticed by another film producer, puts her in more films, which leads to her getting a starring role in the 1933 film Ecstasy.
Ooh, this is an erotic romantic drama. This is quite the scandalous film back then.
Yeah, it is super scandalous for 2 reasons. One, she becomes notorious because in this film, she simulates what the French call le petit mort.
Okay, and what the English call content warning for any children out there and parents with sensitive ears.
Yep.
An orgasm.
Correct. The little death. And it is quite a racy scene. I mean, it's available, of course, on YouTube now.
And you had to do research for this interview.
Yes, of course. And the other bit of research that you have to do is there is a nude skinny dipping scene in a lake in this film. So actually, yeah, I mean, at the time, it was extremely scandalous. Very racy stuff for 1933. So then after this, she basically becomes extremely well-known, and she leaves her husband and her country, and she moves to America to work in Hollywood. Because, of course, this is like the golden age of the dawn of Hollywood. She changes her name to Hedy Lamarr, and this is where the studios start promoting her as the most beautiful woman in the entire world. And apparently, whenever she appears on screen, audiences would gasp, they would swoon at just how beautiful she was. Like, what happens to you when you show up on a Zoom call?
Exactly right. I remember hearing accounts of like a ballet by Stravinsky opening in that era, maybe 10, 15 years earlier. And the ballet, the music was so dissonant and so new age and avant-garde that people like fainted and riots would form. I feel like back then, if you just showed a beautiful woman on the screen, people would lose their mind. Kind of like clips of Beatles fans in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean, we're so jaded now. We're so used to being bombarded with images constantly that to us, it seems weird that you would be that moved just by a face. But of course, this was a time when it was basically a brand new technology. And so something like that was extremely powerful. I mean, there's all sorts of anecdotal stories of that ancient film that showed a train coming at the camera. And there were all sorts of stories that when people were watching that in theaters, they like dove out of their seats and ducked and screamed because they're like, we're going to be killed. Because we weren't used to those images.
We're just so far from the mark of our upcoming second story where she's the godmother of all technology. But let's keep going. So she was in this film Ecstasy in Europe. She moved to the US. She would eventually become on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. She became quite the high-profile actress.
Yeah, like as you said, she was like the it girl. But, I mean, her looks were kind of a double-edged sword. Again, as you know. Because of her looks and her international origins, she's often cast as like an exotic seductress. And she wasn't given that many lines, she wasn't able to do that much acting, she was more on screen as an object. So her beauty is her opportunity, but also kind of limits her. And obviously I'm not a beautiful woman, but I know a lot of beautiful women, and this is something that I've heard from a lot of them. You think of it as an advantage in society, but in some ways there's something kind of disturbing. There's something kind of troubling about being beautiful. One, of course, is the attention that you get is directed at your surface. And two, there's always that worry that your beauty is not going to last, that it's going to fade. And then, of course, what is your worth once your beauty is gone?
Botox. That's a conversation for another time. I think beauty is fickle. Beauty is a weird thing, I think some people are annoyed by their own beauty because they know that someday it will be gone and they want to be known for something else. And other people covet that beauty. They wish they were more beautiful. It's a strange thing.
Yeah, exactly. Your beauty can be annoying to yourself, and your beauty can be annoying to other people who start to envy it or become jealous of the attention you're getting.
No one's going to pity you if you're like, oh, woe is me. People always know me for my looks and not my brains. It's like, it's so hard to pity someone like that. But then as they age, they lose that beauty, and it's rough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But now at this point in her career, she still has her beauty, and so she's still quite popular. Her most iconic role was as one of the most iconic seductresses, because she's in 1949's Samson and Delilah, in which she plays, obviously, Delilah, because playing Samson would have been an odd, but I think bold and interesting choice for her as far as casting goes. But this is kind of her peak. And then, because Hollywood is cruel, especially to women, and doesn't really allow them to age, beauty starts to fade, the doors it opens for you start to close. And so by 1958, she'd appeared in her last film, and the rest of her life started to match the deterioration of her youthful looks.
Interesting. She also had 6 husbands, which I always admire.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of common in Hollywood. You see a lot of switching around. You see a lot of marriages for convenience sake. You see a lot of marriages because they're trendy. By 1966, she gets arrested for shoplifting. And then, towards the end, she just lives a life of seclusion. She would only communicate with people over the telephone. She had gotten some bad plastic surgery to try to hold on to her looks and was unwilling to be seen in public, and then is found dead and alone in her home at 2000 at the age of 85.
When we come back, a new story about a woman named Hedy Lamarr, who you may not have heard of, who was the godmother of all modern technology. What? It's the same woman we just talked about, the godmother of technology. What is going on? We're here with Nathan Radke. It is Conspiracy Corner. Check out Nathan's podcast, The Uncover Up.
This episode is brought to you by Rakuten. The holidays are here, and that means it's the most wonderful time of the year to save with Rakuten. Use Rakuten to stack cash back at your favorite stores on top of holiday sales. That's savings on savings. With Rakuten, you can get cash back on gifts for everyone on your list, from toys for the kids to kitchen gear for the person who loves to cook to electronics for everyone. You can even save on something for yourself. Cash back is automatically added to your account as you shop. And you can get paid with gift cards, PayPal, or check. Or eligible American Express card members can choose to earn membership rewards points. Join for free today and get a new member bonus after minimum qualifying purchases. Just go to Rakuten.com, download the app, or install the browser extension. Terms and conditions apply.
The most beautiful woman in the world, an actress, Hedy Lamarr. That is who we're discussing, but we're not going to talk about her acting career. One of greatness where beauty fades. She died alone under kind of sad circumstances. We're going to talk about a woman who is sometimes credited as creating all modern technology. Perhaps too big a credit, but there's truth to this story. Was she a brilliant inventor? That's what we're discussing here with Nathan Radke, a professor of conspiracy studies at Humber Polytechnic. Check out his podcast, The Uncover Up, a conspiracy theory cast of pod. Nathan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
You know, sometimes you just say the same words so many times. You kind of have to. Like, especially when I'm introducing people whose podcasts have their own name in the podcast title. I'm like, I have to say your name 7 times. What do you do?
Yeah, it's tricky. And also, if the podcast has podcast in the podcast title, you end up saying podcast 100 times, and the word ceases to have any meaning.
Cast of pod. All right. Hedy Lamarr, did she invent Bluetooth and Wi-Fi?
So we just finished telling the story of Hedy Lamarr, the most beautiful woman in the world. Now this is the story of a woman named Hedy Lamarr, who was a brilliant inventor who shaped the modern world, who wasn't taken seriously or given the credit she deserved because of the sexism and chauvinism of her society. So as a teenager, same time Lamarr was taking acting lessons, she was also developing another interest. Her father would take her for these long walks and talk about technology and how machines worked and how they could be improved. And so that interest that she had in tech and machines was focused during her marriage because her husband, Mandel, in addition to being extremely wealthy, was an arms manufacturer. And he would bring her to business meetings filled with scientists and engineers. And in particular, she was interested to learn about the difficulties in remotely controlling torpedoes in the water. Because you can send instructions to your torpedo from the ship through a radio frequency. But if your enemy detects the frequency, then they can interrupt or even maybe supersede your instructions with their own instructions. And so when she moves to Hollywood, she maintains an interest in inventing in tech. And apparently in between takes on movie sets, she would go back to her trailer where she insisted that she had access to the equipment she needed to start working on some of her own inventions. She didn't like drinking. She didn't like partying. What she wanted to do more than anything else was surround herself with other intelligent people and discuss ideas and theories.
Not easy to do in Hollywood.
No, it's not really the town for it. But she's able to invent an improved stoplight and a tablet that you put in water that would apparently turn it into soda.
Delicious.
But during World War II, she turns her impressive mind back to this issue of controlling torpedoes and came up with an idea that would revolutionize technology and change the world. Rather than using a single radio frequency, which of course could be detected and jammed by your target, you design a machine that hops from frequency to frequency. You put one of those devices in the controlling ship. You put one of them into the torpedo. You sync them up so that they're hopping to the same frequency at the same time. And then you fire off the torpedo, safe in the knowledge that your target won't be able to figure out the exact sequence of frequencies that you're using, which means that they won't be able to jam your signal. Like, how important is this idea? You're a computer guy. How important is this idea?
This is how Wi-Fi works. This is how cell phones work. This is how all modern digital and analog wireless communication, maybe not all, but most works. And without this technology, it not only could you have foreign adversaries or anyone jamming, you also just like could have two people trying to communicate at the same time, crashing into each other. This is like the basis for how I'm on the internet right now with Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and so you see how vastly different this story is from the first half of the story. Because now it isn't a story of some vain woman who is beautiful and then the beauty fades and her life ends. this is somebody who had a very rich intellectual life, somebody who made a massive difference. And again, because of the sexism of the society, because nothing was expected of her as a beautiful woman, she doesn't get the credit that she's due. And they actually pitched this idea that she had to the Navy, who didn't listen to her. But then years later, they revisited this idea of signal hopping, as did obviously other military and private industries. And as you say, today, it's just fundamental to all of our tech. And so a lot of people have now pushed forward the idea that, wait a second, was Hedy Lamarr the godmother of all modern technology?
It is a bit of a stretch. Like, she didn't invent Bluetooth, okay? And that technology was probably, thought of by other people at the time. She did contribute, though, and there is a patent in her name. And I think, in some sense, yes. And I don't think we're giving her enough credit. But she didn't invent Wi-Fi. You know what I'm saying?
And that's where we get to story 3. Because the other 2 stories, they're true to a degree. But when we look closer, we find subtleties, we find complexities, we find contradictions. Because, of course, unfortunately, that's what reality is made of, is subtleties and complexities and contradictions. I mean, the truth is that Lamarr was uncomfortable from a young age with the way that people reacted to her beauty. Her husband wasn't just an arms manufacturer, but he was also a fascist with ties to Mussolini and eventually Hitler. And Lamarr was Jewish. So in addition to her older husband being much older and controlling and contributing to fascism, there was an existential threat to her if she had remained in Germany. So she moves to Hollywood, never really enjoys being the center of attention for her looks, was frustrated by the way that her roles were limited to being eye candy. And during World War II, she tries to join the National Inventors Council to help figure out ways to support the American war effort, but was told she'd just be more useful as a pretty face selling war bonds.
Wow.
Now, despite this, she does start working on making these torpedoes. Interestingly, she works with an avant-garde musical composer named George Antheil. And the two of them come up with this amazing idea. You know what a player piano is?
Sure.
Yeah, a player piano has got like this roll with holes punched out of it. And as the roll plays, it commands the different keys to play. And so they said, wait a second. What if we use the same roller mechanism that controls player pianos to hop radio frequencies?
Oh, cool.
So in their patent, it sort of goes between 88 different frequencies, because, of course, there's 88 keys on a piano.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, she was like a nerd. She was an inventor, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a properly interesting idea. Instead of hitting keys, the punch-outs in the roller would switch frequencies. So if you use the same roller in the torpedo and in the control room, start them up at the same time, they'd be synced up. And so, I mean, this is fascinating. This is good stuff. But while we love the idea, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, we love the idea of the lone inventor who comes up with things on their own. The truth is that innovation is a group process for the most part. It requires different people working together, combining their perspectives and knowledge, and also building on the work of their predecessors and peers. We don't like that story as much. And the Lamarr-Antheil patent was proposed to the Navy, but they rejected it because the player piano mechanism in it was just too heavy.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
You can't put that in a torpedo.
In a torpedo, that's ridiculous. It's too delicate. It's not going to work reliably in a torpedo. And also, this idea of frequency hopping, like so many good ideas, it was discovered independently, obviously, of Lamarr by other inventors, both before and after she came up with her idea. And so, both of those stories that try to capture Lamarr, neither of them quite do it. The first story appeals to like our darker selves, our sense of resentment and schadenfreude. We want to see somebody who's conceited getting like brought down to our level, getting what's coming to them. But of course, a story like that misses out on the humanity behind the person. The second story appeals to our sense of justice and fairness because we're outraged that this person is denied what they deserve because of sinister forces, but it misses out on some of the truths of the situation. The third story is the most accurate, in some ways the least satisfying.
I think in reality, the true narratives about people aren't going to match the lore. They're not going to match, like, we want to call her the godmother of technology or the most beautiful woman in the world. But she was an interesting figure, and I'm really happy to have discussed her with you, Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why we have to, pay attention to stories, because sometimes the least satisfying ones are, unfortunately, the most accurate ones, and in some ways, more interesting.
All right. the interesting tale of Hedy Lamarr concludes. Nathan Radke, check out his podcast, The Uncover Up. I appreciate you being on the show, Nathan.
Thanks for having me on.